In 2023, 10 artists gathered from across New York State to discuss their work for the Rural and Traditional Arts Fellowship. This is their story.
I work with concrete and stone.
I'm a socially engaged artist.
I'm a social practice experimental performance artist.
I make wooden lacrosse sticks and Mohawk black ash basket.
I am a multimedia artist.
I am a sculptor and an installation artist.
I write poetry and I create performances.
I'm a singer-songwriter, musician.
I'm a filmmaker and I'm the director of the short film In Place of a Time Before.
I'm a weaver, but I'm a willow weaver.
You know how they say if you want to make change, start in your own backyard? I've been working on my own garden called an eco garden. I took, in the very beginning, a year to see what would grow in my vegetable garden if I just let it go and do what it wanted to do. And what came up was this small grove of white mulberry trees. Well, these white mulberries, they came over here because people thought that they could make money planting mulberry trees to start the silkworm industry to supplement all the silk mills that were being established in the Northeast. The silk industry in Whitehall was the peak of its economic era. I mean, the early 1900s, it was amazing. It employed like over 4,000 people. There's all this history behind something that's right beneath my own feet. And then I thought, what kind of art can I make out of this? Here's this little plant that is bringing these stories literally back up to the surface. This is super, super specific. It's specific to my backyard, which is also specific to New York State, which is also specific to a lot of other areas as well, because what it's doing is it's encouraging people to go home and look in their own backyards. It's also creating an appreciation of the town, of what it once was, of what it is, and maybe some hope for what it could be.
The reason I went towards art in general, or sculpting, was A, it's tactile, touch it, and B, it was a moment where I could stop and look at the piece I created, and it just took me away. How can I capture community, rural? Well, I live in Wyoming County. It's the two biggest producers of milk and maple syrup in the state. So I made a concrete chicken, concrete cow, and a concrete tree with a maple sap bucket in front of it. You can't get much rural than a cow, and maple syrup, and chicken, and it's traditional. How many families go back generations? Dairy farms. Maple production's been around forever. And the chickens, everybody's got chickens in the country. So to me, the tradition and the rural aspect of it, it was easy for me. It really was. I love working with my hands in artwork, and I think that's one thing that gets overlooked sometimes because everything's digital, computerized. This is concrete. I'm building art with my hands. Not knocking painting, not knocking anything digital. It's just, for me, I need to have that tactile approach to creating art. Everybody's an artist. Everybody is. It's just what you see, what you don't see, whatever. Everybody's an artist. Just different people do it different ways, not better or worse. It's everybody creates. If you create, you're an artist. I have a ball. I have a ball doing it.
I believe I was born spatial. So I came out of the womb all about space. Defining and containing spaces is easy for me to do, and willow is an incredibly glorious material. So the work that I've done for 40 years involves making baskets. After a lot of change of circumstances, I ended up in a rural area, and that feels good. I'm not a city person. The fellowship is an incredible, wonderful, wonderful challenge for me, because I'm moving from baskets and I'm moving into weaving a boat. So I took on the project, the grant, the fellowship being land-based. I decided on the Shenango Canal. I'm in Shenango County. With regard to a new work, right, let me do a model of a packet boat that was on the canal, and will, you know, the ultimate piece for the fellowship is the christening of all the boats. The boat that I make, I'm making it a 1:6 scale, and that will be 3 feet long by 6 inches wide, and all completely woven out of willow. And I am challenged, and I am working on the challenge, and it's great fun. So I feel very, very excited to have the opportunity to build something in a form that it really is just out of the norm for me. So I'm very thankful. I believe I will never retire. I believe I will always be working with my medium.
Socially engaged art asks us to get to know more about the world around us, as well as our relationship to that world and ourselves. For a socially engaged artist, typically the relationships between people are the medium of the work. So instead of painting with paint or molding and shaping with clay to create a sculpture, we're shaping and painting with the relationships in communities that sometimes intersect and sometimes don't. So we are working regionally as Emergent CNY, mostly in rural areas. We've given thousands of rides because we don't have public transportation in the area, nor access to corporate ride shares, given away tens of thousands of dollars of cash, no questions asked, gotten people the resources and the services they need that perhaps just as a way of filling gaps. That story isn't necessarily told, and we don't have a way of archiving it. What we're going to be able to do is record the work that we've been doing, honor the work that's been done before, and also create a space so that that story can travel and be broadcast. People make up places, and there are people everywhere. Living in Earlville, living in central New York, and traveling and creating community with others. It's incredibly multi-diverse. It's not the middle of nowhere. And if we would actually recognize that all of us is not only interconnected, but that we could value whatever each of us has to offer in kind and in reciprocation, that we might be in a different place as a country, I would say.
My project is the Cherry Valley Water Project. So I'm connecting my community to the watershed, the creeks, the rain, the snow, the drought, through the different elements in performance arts. I was drawn to dance and specifically contact improv because it wasn't set choreography. It was explorative and playful and interactive, and you're following the momentum of your own inner pulse and the listening to how gravity and touch plays against the surfaces and your weight against the floor, and also where your emotions are in that moment. I don't know, I've traveled a lot in my life. I've lived in other places, and there's something about being from somewhere and coming back there and having multiple generations in one place. And that's also a lovely thing about a small rural community. I know the hills, I know that, like, the shape of the back of my hand, and I know where all the creeks are, and I've spent a lot of my life walking along the creeks and listening to the birds, and I think it's a big part of my spirituality. It's a big part of what makes me human and alive and connected to something bigger than myself, bigger than my cell phone, bigger than my social media presence. Is to really connect and listen to the nature of that place. The small places don't have to be a respite from the world. They can be the whole world in and of themselves because they offer so much.
I love the native art. I did beadwork, I did rattles, I did the loom work, I did leather work. We always played lacrosse because we never, like people like, oh, I signed my kid up on this day, it was his first day. I don't remember when we started. We've always just played lacrosse. and people have just always made baskets. We have probably the dominant hub of basket making and lacrosse stick making in Akwesasne. Probably the highest ratio of people still doing it, and the Mohawk language too. All the way from cutting the trees, selecting the trees, breaking them down, pounding them out for all the basket splint, pretty much from the tree right to the finished product. It's peaceful. It's like the lacrosse is the medicine game. They call it Dewa Aladon. So it's given to us by the Creator for our medicine. So my medicine in dealing with stuff is going in the woods, being out there nice and quiet, and then I find the perfect tree, I check it, you know, we notch it, make sure we want it. It's just nice for me to be out there, a part of it, rather than buying logs from somebody who has a business doing logs. So that's part of my medicine when I go sit down by the river and I'll work on a lacrosse stick, or I'll sit down by the river and I'll work on a pack basket or something and burn off half a day, and it just feels so much more connected than some of the other stuff we do.
I think the great benefit of being a rural artist is having space and silence. I'm really essentially a poet and work through language as my vessel or medium to intuit or configure the world or worlds. And so the piece was called Persephone's Dream, and it was a theatrical piece. Even though I live in a village home and cars drive by, we were able to put on this performance, which is totally transparent to the main road. I feel like sometimes when you're in a place where there's more population density, you don't always have that luxury of space and being able to form your intimate, idiosyncratic relationship to it. This performance, in a way, was challenging because I wasn't necessarily working from language first. Language or poetry wasn't only ever to me words on a page. I always felt like the words were all around me, which I think this project in many ways speaks towards, because we were also wanting to learn how to speak with birds, learn how to connect with the forest and everything that lives there. Acknowledging artists all across the board as this work is vital to communities is so important.
I'm finally finding my voice. And I'm 62, and I keep telling people I'm an emerging artist. Currently working on land art. My piece that I propose for this fellowship is to talk a little bit about what is my responsibility as a landowner and thinking about the impact of development on land. What I'd love for people to experience is the beauty of the natural landscape. And I'm thinking about, like, what is the new American landscape? Is it now to really think about how houses can fill every inch of the landscape? Or how can we save some of the agricultural lands and the natural lands so that we can hear the birds and see the wildlife? So the proposal is to mow what would be like the roads and every one of the lots, and mow the footprint of leave the footprint of what a typical 2,000 square foot house would be. Not necessarily anti-development, because I'm not anti-development, but it is about like careful development. What is the impact of art in a rural community? Will what I do on my land really impact anyone else? I don't know. All I can do is put it out there, try to talk to people about it. It's really just a point of conversation, I think. What I have noticed is that everyone has this sense of not being as good or taken seriously because we're not in a city. But I've found that just doesn't really matter. What I've been teaching for 30 years is that it's really in the intention and then the follow through and how you talk about it or discuss it or help other people to see it. And so it took me 62 years.
I am a rural artist, it's where I live, and those are the types of stories that I want to tell, and that's kind of the message that I want to send throughout my work. It's really important to me to bring in different aspects of my landscape, of my home. There is this misconception that we can only create in larger, you can only get funding in larger city centers. And that's much about what the film is speaking to, is figuring out your place and being okay with where to settle and where to, you know, maybe raise a family, or where you want to go and where you want to stay. The character of Maggie is incredibly practical. She talks about what parts of a landscape make it worthwhile. And Sam is much more romantic, and he is much more looking at the beauty of things and looking at places that he could maybe escape to when he needs to escape. I feel like in me, in my experience growing up in Northern New York, that's part of the struggle that I'm having now. I am very much influenced by my environment and my landscape, and I need to have both of those things. I want it to be beautiful, but I also need to make sure that I have firewood, you know?
My chosen art is to create an EP and a music video around the EP, just showing off kind of rural Elmira, I guess you can say. One thing that I can say about Elmira is it's like a boiling pot of all these different genres. In the southern tier, you have farm and you have cattle. But then in the inner city, I guess you can say, you have hip hop, you have R&B, you have gospel.
You know that I'm trying, heaven knows that I'm trying, baby.
So kind of just having like all these worlds that have always been inspiring and kind of like not glaring down at me, but kind of like encapsulating the place in which I've grown up. You know, just putting all these worlds together, I guess that's what created Isaiah Smallwood. I don't want to be a person who works a 9-to-5 every day, dreaming about what they could be doing. I want to be the person that pushes the envelope. And yeah, you know, paying bills is tough, but I feel liberated. I feel as if I'm who I want to be and not who someone who pays me minimum wage wants me to be. I'm so glad that someone from Elmira had this opportunity, just because Elmira needs hope. And, you know, to be able to spread this hope about, you know, believing in yourself, going after your goals with money from this grant, it means the world. There's another song on the album that's going to be called Soar. And what Soar is it's a story of a young man whom came from a very like sheltered or like rural town that got to, you know, where he's going and realized that if you just believe in yourself, you can do anything. This is where I want to be. This is where I feel I'm called to be. This is where home is for me.
To get right back to you.
And I'll do anything to create home.